Step out of the vehicle. Now.
Deputy, I am not required to answer questions about my travel.
You're refusing a lawful order. Step out or I will remove you.
You're escalating without cause. That's a mistake.
I don't care who you think you are. Get out of the car!
And you're about to learn exactly who I am.
Step out of the vehicle. Excuse me, I said step out of the vehicle. You're not hearing me. I asked you a lawful question about your destination and you're refusing to answer. I am not refusing to answer, Deputy. I am exercising my right to remain silent regarding my personal travels. Step out or I will remove you. You are making a mistake, son. I don't care who you think you are. Get out of the car. Deputy Kyle Vance had been patrolling the stretches of Highway 95 for 6 years, and in his mind, he was the final authority on who belonged on his roads and who didn't. He was 28 years old, broad-shouldered and accustomed to total compliance. It was a bright, blistering Tuesday afternoon in July. The heat waves were shimmering off the asphalt, distorting the horizon of the quiet county road that cut through the rural heart of Georgia. Vance had pulled over a silver 2024 Mercedes S-Class, not because it was speeding and not because it had swerved. He pulled it over because the windows were tinted. The plates were from Washington, D.C., and the driver was a black man in a suit who didn't look like the locals Vance was used to dealing with. The driver was Marcus Thorne. He was 56 years old, his hair graying at the temples, his hands resting calmly at the 10 and 2 position on the leather steering wheel. He wore a tailored Navy suit that cost more than Deputy Vance's monthly salary, and his demeanor was one of unnatural calm. Most people, when lights flash in their rearview mirror, feel a spike of adrenaline. Their hands shake. Their voices crack. They apologize before they even know what they've done wrong. Marcus Thorne did none of those things. He simply pulled over, lowered all 4 windows to show visibility, turned off the engine, and waited. Vance had approached the passenger side first, peering through the glass, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. He saw a clean interior. No trash, no travel bags visible, just a locked heavy-duty Pelican case on the back seat. He walked around to the driver's side, the gravel crunching loudly under his boots in the heavy silence of the afternoon. "License and registration," Vance had demanded, foregoing the usual greeting. Thorne had handed them over instantly. The license identified him as a resident of the District of Columbia. The registration showed the vehicle belonged to the U.S. General Services Administration, though it was leased through a private luxury fleet for executive cover. Vance missed that detail. He was too focused on the man. "What are you doing out here in Liberty County?" Vance asked, leaning down his sunglasses, reflecting Thorne's impassive face. "I am traveling through," Thorne said. His voice was deep, resonant, and clipped. "Traveling through from where? From a location north of here." Vance's jaw tightened. "And where are you headed?" "To a location south of here." "Don't get cute with me," Vance snapped. "I'm asking you simple questions. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got no reason not to answer. Is this your car?" "The registration is in your hand, Deputy." "It says GSA Fleet. You a government employee?" "I am." "What department?" "That is not relevant to this traffic stop. You pulled me over. I have provided my license and registration. Unless you can articulate a crime or a traffic infraction, I'd like to be on my way." That was the moment the dynamic shifted. To Deputy Vance, this wasn't a citizen asserting his rights. It was a challenge to his dominance. He saw a man who needed to be humbled. He didn't know he was talking to a man whose job was literally to hunt down bad cops, corrupt departments, and misuse of federal power. He didn't know that Marcus Thorne wasn't just a government employee. He was a senior field auditor for the Office of the Inspector General, specializing in civil rights compliance and DOJ funding oversight. And Deputy Vance was about to walk right into a trap of his own making. Marcus Thorne was not a man who panicked. Panic was a luxury for people who didn't know the rules, and Thorne had spent the last 25 years writing the rules. Before joining the Inspector General's office, he had served 12 years as a federal prosecutor in Chicago, dismantling racketeering rings and sending corrupt aldermen to prison. He had a law degree from Yale and a master's in forensic accounting. He had spent the last decade leading quiet, devastating audits of police departments that accepted federal grants but failed to uphold constitutional policing standards. His supervisors in D.C. called him the Scalpel. He didn't make noise. He didn't hold press conferences. He simply arrived in a town, reviewed the books, analyzed the body cam footage, interviewed the victims, and then dropped a report that could freeze millions of dollars in funding and trigger grand jury indictments. He was meticulous. He was patient, and he was currently on assignment. Thorne was in Liberty County because the Department of Justice had received a statistical anomaly report. This specific sheriff's department, despite serving a population that was only 12% black, had a traffic stop record where 68% of the stops involved black drivers. Furthermore, asset forfeiture precedes money, and cars seized from citizens had skyrocketed by 300% in 2 years. Someone was running a highway interdiction scheme, stopping out-of-state drivers, seizing their cash under suspicion of drug trafficking, and never filing charges. It was highway robbery with a badge. Thorne wasn't just passing through, he was the bait. He was driving a luxury car on a route known for these stops, carrying a suspicious-looking case to see if the department would follow the law or the pattern. He watched Deputy Vance in the side mirror. He noted the aggressive stance, the lack of a hat, which was a violation of uniform code for this department, and the agitation in the officer's body language. Thorne had his internal clock running. The Supreme Court had ruled in Rodriguez v. United States that a traffic stop cannot be prolonged beyond the time reasonably required to address the traffic violation. Every second Vance spent fishing for information instead of writing a ticket was another nail in his legal coffin. Thorne had seen hundreds of officers like Vance in his career. They were usually young, usually undertrained, and usually convinced that the badge granted them the powers of a king rather than the responsibilities of a servant. They confused fear with respect. Thorne felt no fear. He only felt a cold, professional disappointment that his suspicions about this county were being confirmed so quickly. Deputy Vance, on the other hand, was operating on instinct, and his instincts were terrible. At 28, Vance had already been the subject of 14 citizen complaints in his short 6-year career. They were almost all the same rudeness, intimidation, and profiling. "He treated me like a criminal in front of my kids," one complaint read. "He searched my car without asking," said another. But in the Liberty County Sheriff's Department, Vance was considered a producer. He brought in revenue. He found drugs, usually small amounts, but enough to seize the vehicles. He found cash, large amounts which the department got to keep a share of. His sergeant, a man who believed the ends justified the means, had signed off on every one of those 14 complaints as unfounded or exonerated. Vance had been trained by the older guys to look for pre-flight indicators. He was taught that nervousness was guilt, that eye contact was aggression, and that knowing the law was a sign of a sovereign citizen or a troublemaker. When he looked at Marcus Thorne, he didn't see a federal auditor. He saw a mark. He saw a black man in a car that cost $120,000 refusing to say where he was going. In Vance's world, that meant drugs, money, or warrants. "Dispatch, show me on a stop mile marker 44. Vance muttered into his radio, his eyes never leaving Thorne's face. One male uncooperative. "Copy 44. The dispatch crackled back. "Need backup." "Start me a unit," Vance said. He wanted an audience. He wanted to show the new guy how to handle a smart-mouth out-of-towner. Vance leaned back into the window. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Step out of the vehicle." "For what purpose?" Thorne asked. He kept his hands visible. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke to Vance like a disappointed teacher speaking to a slow student. "I detect the odor of marijuana coming from the vehicle," Vance lied. It was the oldest trick in the book. The smell of marijuana gave probable cause to search a car without a warrant. It was unverifiable on video, subjective, and had been used to justify millions of illegal searches across the country. But Vance had made a critical error. "That is impossible, Deputy," Thorne said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I have never smoked marijuana in my life. This is a rental vehicle that was detailed 3 hours ago in Atlanta, and you are standing upwind." "I know what I smell," Vance said, his hand dropping to the door handle. "Now, under Pennsylvania v. Mims, I have the right to order you out of the vehicle for officer safety. Are you refusing a lawful order?" Thorne knew the case law better than Vance did. Pennsylvania v. Mims did allow officers to order drivers out for safety, but it didn't grant them the right to search the vehicle without cause. Thorne made a calculation. If he resisted physically, he would be hurt or killed. The goal of the audit was to document the violation, not to become a martyr. "I am complying under duress," Thorne stated clearly for the body camera he knew was recording. "I do not consent to any searches. I am invoking my Fourth Amendment rights. I am stepping out only because you are threatening me with force." "Just get out," Vance grunted, yanking the door open. Thorne unbuckled his seatbelt. He moved slowly, deliberately. He stepped out onto the hot asphalt, standing a full head taller than Deputy Vance. He smoothed his suit jacket. "Turn around," Vance barked. "Hands on the roof." "Am I under arrest?" Thorne asked. "You're being detained for obstruction and suspicion of DUI," Vance said, adding another fabrication to the list. "I need to check you for weapons." Vance patted Thorne down aggressively, his hands checking pockets, moving up the legs, patting the chest. He felt the heavy leather wallet in the inside pocket. He spun Thorne around. "What's in the case in the back seat?" Vance asked, nodding toward the Pelican case. "That case contains sensitive federal government property," Thorne said. "You do not have the clearance to open it, and you do not have a warrant to seize it." Vance laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Buddy, on this highway, I am the clearance. If you've got nothing to hide, open the case." "I am telling you, Deputy." Thorne's voice dropped an octave, becoming steel-hard. "Do not touch that case. Do not enter my vehicle. You are currently violating Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code Deprivation of Rights under color of law. If you proceed, you will be held personally liable." Vance stopped. For a split second, the specificity of the statute number made him hesitate. Most people just yelled, "I know my rights." This man was citing federal code, but Vance's ego was too far engaged to retreat now. The backup cruiser was pulling up gravel spraying. He had to look in control. "Turn around," Vance said, grabbing Thorne's wrist. "You're under arrest." "For what crime?" "Obstruction of justice, resisting an officer, and we'll see what else when I open that trunk." Vance twisted Thorne's arm behind his back harder than necessary. Thorne winced, but didn't struggle. He allowed Vance to snap the handcuffs on his wrists. The metal bit into his skin. The heat of the sun was intense, but the cold realization of what was happening was colder. "You are making a career-ending mistake," Thorne said quietly. "My credentials are in my wallet. I suggest you look at them before you put me in that car." "I'll look at them at the station," Vance said, shoving Thorne toward the patrol car. "Right now, you're going for a ride." Vance pushed Thorne into the back of the cruiser. The plastic seat was hard and smelled of stale sweat and disinfectant. Thorne sat awkwardly, his hands cuffed behind him, watching through the plexiglass divider. He watched Deputy Vance walk back to the Mercedes. He watched him pull on a pair of blue latex gloves. He watched the backup officer, a rookie named Higgins, walk up to the passenger side. They were laughing. Vance was pointing at the car, probably bragging about the bust. Vance opened the back door of the Mercedes. He reached in and grabbed the Pelican case. It was locked with a heavy-duty padlock. Vance disappeared into his own trunk and came back with a pair of bolt cutters. "Don't do it," Thorne whispered to the empty air of the patrol car. "Don't be that stupid." Vance snapped the lock. He threw the latch open and lifted the lid. Inside, there were no drugs. There was no cash. There were stacks of files marked top secret, law enforcement sensitive. There was a laptop with a government asset tag, and sitting right on top was a large laminated placard that read, Office of the Inspector General, Field Audit Unit. Vance stared at it. He picked up a file. The header read Liberty County Sheriff's Department, Civil Rights Pattern and Practice Investigation, Target Subject Patrol Division. Vance froze. He looked at the file, then back at the car where Thorne was sitting. He looked at Higgins, who was holding a stack of papers he'd found in the glove box. Kyle, Higgins said, his voice trembling slightly. This registration, it's not just GSA. It's registered to the Department of Justice. And this ID card, it says Federal Agent. Vance felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine, unrelated to the July heat. He looked at the badge in the wallet he had confiscated. It was a heavy gold shield. United States Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. He's a Fed, Higgins whispered. He's a high-level Fed. Vance stood there on the side of the road, the bolt cutters hanging from his hand like a dead weight. The trucks thundered past on the highway, shaking the ground, but Vance felt like the world had gone silent. He looked at the man in the back of his car. Thorne was looking right back at him. He wasn't angry. He was waiting. Vance slammed the Pelican case shut, but the damage was done. The seal was broken. The chain of custody was violated. He walked slowly back to his cruiser, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He opened the driver's door and sat in the front seat. He didn't turn around. He adjusted his rear-view mirror so he could see Thorne's eyes. You're a Fed, Vance said. It wasn't a question. I am a senior field auditor, Thorne replied calmly. And you have just illegally arrested me, illegally searched a federal vehicle and destroyed government property. I want your supervisor. Now. I can unarrest you, Vance said, his voice sounding desperate even to his own ears. We can say this was a misunderstanding. You refused to identify yourself properly. I gave you my license. You didn't ask for my occupation until you had already decided to harass me, Thorne said. This is not a misunderstanding, Deputy. This is a crime scene, and you are the suspect. Drive me to the station. Look, man, I have a family, Vance said, the tough guy facade crumbling instantly. If I bring you in, if you let me go here, I will add kidnapping to the list of charges, Thorne said. Drive the car. The drive to the Liberty County precinct took 20 minutes. It was the longest 20 minutes of Kyle Vance's life. He tried to think of a narrative. He was erratic. He reached for something. I thought the case was a weapon, but he knew the body camera was running. He knew he hadn't muted the audio. He knew he had lied about the marijuana smell. When they pulled into the sally port of the jail, the heavy metal doors clanged shut behind them, sealing Vance's fate. He walked Thorne into the processing area, still in handcuffs. The watch commander was Sergeant Miller, a man in his late 50s with a thick mustache and tired eyes. He looked up from his desk as Vance marched Thorne in. Miller had been a cop for 30 years. He knew the look of a drunk, he knew the look of a thief, and he knew the look of trouble. Thorne looked like trouble. What do we have? Miller asked, standing up. Traffic stop, Vance mumbled. Obstruction. Resisting. Miller looked at Thorne. He saw the suit. He saw the expensive shoes. He saw the way Thorne stood erect, chin up, analyzing the room. Sir Miller said to Thorne, Name ye Marcus Thorne, United States Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. The room went dead silent. The booking officer stopped typing. A deputy in the corner lowered his coffee cup. Miller looked at Vance. What did he say? He's claiming he's a Fed, Vance said, trying to sound dismissive but failing. I am not claiming, Thorne said. Reaching into his pocket is not advised, Sergeant, as I am handcuffed, but my credentials are in Deputy Vance's pocket, along with the key to the federal vehicle he just ransacked without a warrant. Miller walked around the desk. He held out his hand to Vance. "Give me the wallet." Vance handed it over. Miller opened it. He looked at the badge. He looked at the credentials. He looked at the security hologram that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. He looked at the text, authorized to carry firearms, authorized to conduct investigations. All agencies are requested to assist. Miller closed the wallet slowly. He looked at Vance with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You arrested an OIG auditor." Miller's voice was a low growl. "He wouldn't answer my questions," Vance stammered. "He was acting suspicious. I smelled weed." "You smelled weed," Miller repeated, looking at Thorne, "on a man in a $3,000 suit driving a GSA car." "It was a mistake," Vance said. "Remove the cuffs," Miller ordered. "Sergeant," Thorne interrupted. "Do not remove these cuffs yet." Miller paused. "Excuse me." "I want the FBI called," Thorne said. "I want the resident agent in charge for this district notified immediately. I am currently the victim of a deprivation of rights under color of law. If you take these cuffs off now, you are tampering with the evidence of an ongoing crime. You will leave them on until a federal agent arrives to document the scene." Miller stared at Thorne. He realized then that this wasn't just an arrest. This was a demolition. Thorne wasn't trying to get out of jail. He was trying to burn the jail down, legally speaking. "Sir Pay," Miller said, his tone shifting to one of pleading deference. "We can sort this out right here. Deputy Vance made a judgment error. We can release you, drop all charges, and I'll handle the discipline internally." "That is not how this works," Thorne said. "I am here conducting an audit on this specific type of misconduct, and your deputy just provided the perfect case study. Make the call, Sergeant, or I will ensure that you are named in the lawsuit for conspiracy to cover up a civil rights violation." Miller swallowed hard. He went to the phone. His hand shook as he dialed the number for the FBI field office in Atlanta. Vance stood in the corner, his face pale. He watched Thorne. Thorne didn't look back. He was staring at the wall, composing his report in his head. 2 hours later, the precinct was swarming. 3 FBI agents in suits were interviewing Vance in an interrogation room. The sheriff himself had arrived red-faced and sweating, trying to apologize to Thorne, who was now sitting in the sergeant's office sipping water, finally out of handcuffs. The dash cam footage was pulled. The body cam footage was downloaded. It was played on the big screen in the conference room. The room watched in silence as Vance demanded the ID, as he lied about the smell of marijuana, as he twisted the arm of a compliant 56-year-old man, as he cut the lock on a federal case. "Jesus," the sheriff whispered. "He cited Mims and Rodriguez to you, and you still arrested him." Vance, sitting at the table, looked small. "I thought he was a lawyer. I didn't know he was... that?" "It shouldn't matter who he was," the lead FBI agent said. "That's the point, Vance. You treated a citizen like this. The fact that he turned out to be the one man who could end you is just karma. But what you did, that's criminal." The fallout was swift and absolute. Marcus Thorne filed his report the next morning. It was 40 pages long, detailed and blistering. It didn't just name Vance. It named the sergeant who signed off on the prior complaints, the sheriff who encouraged the revenue-generating stops, and the training officer who taught the pre-flight indicators. The Department of Justice descended on Liberty County. They didn't just audit the books. They turned the department inside out. They found the pattern of racial profiling. They found the missing asset forfeiture money. They found the culture of silence. Deputy Kyle Vance was fired 4 days later. But it didn't end there. Because Thorne pressed charges, the local district attorney, fearing federal intervention, charged Vance with official oppression and false imprisonment. He pleaded guilty to avoid jail time, accepting a sentence of 3 years probation and the permanent surrender of his law enforcement certification. He would never hold a badge again. He was 28, and his career was dust. The county settled Marcus Thorne's civil rights lawsuit for $3.4 million. Thorne donated the entire amount to a legal defense fund for indigent drivers in Georgia. 6 months later, Marcus Thorne sat in a coffee shop in D.C., reading the final news clipping about the case. The Liberty County Sheriff's Department had been placed under a federal consent decree. Every stop was now monitored. Every search required written consent or a warrant. The highway interdiction team had been disbanded. He took a sip of his coffee. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel triumph. He felt tired. He thought about the look on Vance's face, not the fear of getting caught, but the genuine confusion that his authority could be questioned. Vance had truly believed that because he wore the badge, he was the law. He had forgotten that the law exists to protect the people from the badge, not the other way around. Thorne closed the newspaper. He checked his watch. He had another audit in Alabama starting on Monday. Another town, another highway, another department that had forgotten who they worked for. He stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked out into the sunlight. The work wasn't done. It was never done. But for one afternoon in Georgia, on a hot stretch of asphalt, the system had worked not because of the system, but because one man stood his ground and forced it to listen. How many drivers like Marcus Thorne pass through towns like Liberty County every day, but don't have the badge to protect them? Do you think officers should carry personal liability insurance for misconduct lawsuits instead of taxpayers footing the bill? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in holding power accountable, please like and subscribe. It helps us tell more stories like this one. Stay safe out there.
Drop it! Get on the ground now! Hands behind your back! Officer, the tire is flat. My hands are empty. I am not a... Turn around! You're being detained! My name is Marcus Thorne, City Legal Director. Your body cam is on. This is an unlawful detention.
The scene was surreal. A 54-year-old man in pressed slacks and a polo shirt kneeling next to a deflated tire being treated like an armed felon. Marcus Thorne watched the officer's face. He saw the adrenaline, the dilated pupils, the sweat beading on the young man's forehead. He saw the lack of assessment. Braden wasn't looking at the flat tire. He wasn't looking at the hazard lights blinking rhythmically against the bright afternoon sun. He was looking at a black man holding a heavy metal object in a neighborhood where he decided Marcus didn't belong. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, steady and authoritative, the voice he used when addressing the city council. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am the Director of Legal Affairs for this municipality. My identification is in the glove box. The car is registered to the city. If you escalate this further, you will be violating the Fourth Amendment, and you will be doing so without qualified immunity because the situation clearly does not warrant this level of force." "Shut up! Turn around, hands behind your back!" Braden advanced, pulling his taser. Marcus didn't flinch. He slowly placed the lug wrench on the ground and stood up, dusting off his knees. He didn't turn around. He looked Officer Braden directly in the eye. "I am standing. My hands are empty. I am not a threat. But understand this, your body camera is blinking. Every word you say, every command you give that lacks reasonable suspicion is being recorded. And I assure you, I will be the one reviewing that footage first thing Monday morning." But before we see exactly how Officer Braden destroys his entire life in the next 10 minutes, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that no one is above the law, and that includes the people wearing badges, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video if you think citizens deserve respect. This story is about to show you exactly what happens when arrogance meets authority. You don't want to miss the fallout. Marcus Thorne was a man of routine and precision. At 54, he had built a life on the bedrock of the law. He didn't believe in shortcuts. He believed in statutes, precedents, and the rigorous application of justice. He had started as a public defender, grinding through the system for pennies before moving to the city attorney's office. Over 25 years, he had climbed the ladder rung by rung until he sat at the top. He was the shield for the city. When a sidewalk cracked and someone tripped, Marcus handled it. When a contract dispute threatened to stall a construction project, Marcus smoothed it over. And when police officers stepped out of line, Marcus was the one who calculated the liability. He was a man who respected the uniform because he knew how difficult the job was. He had defended plenty of good officers who had made honest mistakes in split-second situations. But he had no patience for bullies. That Sunday had been perfect. He had taken his Jaguar XJ, a retirement gift to himself a few years early out, for a spin to clear his head before a heavy week of budget hearings. He was driving through the Highlands, a neighborhood of sprawling estates and oak trees, when the telltale thump-thump-thump of a blowout shuddered through the steering wheel. It was an annoyance, nothing more. Marcus pulled over to a safe spot on the wide shoulder, engaged his hazard lights, and got to work. He didn't call 8AA. He was a man who took pride in self-sufficiency. He took off his suit jacket, folded it neatly on the passenger seat, and retrieved the jack and lug wrench from the trunk. He was loosening the lug nuts, focusing on the task, enjoying the physical labor, when the siren chirped behind him. Officer Kyle Braden was 28 years old and had been on the force for 4 years. He was known in the precinct as a charger, an officer who loved the action, who looked for trouble where there wasn't any. He had received a call from dispatch about a suspicious person report. A neighbor, likely peering through blinds 3 streets over, had called in about someone loitering near driveways. The description was non-existent, just a male. When Braden turned the corner and saw the silver Jaguar with a black man kneeling beside it, his brain didn't register motorist in distress. It registered suspect. He didn't see the flat tire. He didn't see the hazard lights. He saw a man who didn't fit his image of the Highlands holding a metal bar. Bias is a funny thing. It acts like a filter, stripping away context and leaving only fear and aggression. Braden slammed his cruiser into park and didn't even check the license plate. If he had, he would have seen the municipal government tags. He would have seen the official business designation. But he didn't check. He just opened his door and started screaming. The disconnect was immediate, Marcus would later write in his statement. I was engaged in a mundane act of vehicle maintenance. The officer was engaged in a high-risk felony stop. We were in 2 different realities. The problem was, he was the one with the gun. Officer, Marcus tried again, keeping his hands raised to shoulder height, palms open. You are making a detention. For a detention to be lawful, you need reasonable suspicion that a crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed. I am changing a flat tire. That is not a crime. Please tell me what specific crime you suspect me of. Braden's face was flushed red. He wasn't used to people talking back like this. He was used to fear. He was used to, yes, sir, and sorry, sir. This man's vocabulary, detention, reasonable suspicion, lawful, felt like an insult. It felt like a challenge to his authority. You're acting belligerent, Braden spat out, stepping closer. I'm investigating a report of a suspicious person in the area. You fit the description. What description? Marcus pressed his voice, calm but sharp as a razor. Did the report describe a man in a polo shirt fixing a Jaguar? Did it describe a flat tire? Or did it just describe a black man? Stop arguing with me. I need to see ID, now. I would be happy to provide it, Marcus said. As I told you, my wallet is in the glove compartment. I am going to move to the passenger door and retrieve it. Don't you move, Braden yelled, his hand dropping to the grip of his pistol. You stay right there. If you reach for that car, I will drop you. It was the classic catch-22, a trap Marcus had seen in hundreds of case files. Show me your ID, but if you move to get your ID, I will shoot you for reaching. It was a logic loop designed to force non-compliance. If Marcus didn't produce the ID, he was refusing to identify. If he went to get it, he was reaching for a weapon. Officer, Marcus said, keeping his body perfectly still. You have created a situation where compliance is impossible. You are ordering me to produce identification while simultaneously ordering me not to move. This is a violation of Department Policy Section 402.1 regarding citizen contacts. I am asking you to call your supervisor. Call a sergeant to the scene. Now. I don't need a sergeant to handle a resisting suspect, Braden sneered. He was losing control of the interaction, and he knew it. The man wasn't scared. The man was lecturing him. And that made Braden feel small. It made him feel stupid. And a man like Kyle Braden would burn the world down before he let a suspect make him feel stupid. "I'm not resisting," Marcus said. "I am explaining the law to you. And I am telling you for your own sake, look at the tire. Just look down. It is flat. The jack is under the frame. Use your eyes, son. Don't let your prejudice drive this car off the cliff." The word son snapped something in Braden. He holstered his taser and reached for his handcuffs. "That's it. You're done. Turn around." Marcus Thorne had a choice. He could physically resist, which would get him tased or shot and would give the officer a legal defense later. Or he could submit, allow the violation to happen, and then use the full weight of the legal system to crush the department. He was a chess player. He knew that sometimes you have to lose a pawn to take the king. "I am complying," Marcus said loudly for the benefit of the body camera and the neighbors who had started to gather on their porches. He saw Mrs. Gable from the Homeowners Association standing by her hedges holding her phone up. Good. Witnesses. "I am turning around. I am placing my hands behind my back. I am doing this under duress and in protest of an unlawful arrest." Braden grabbed Marcus's wrists and twisted them roughly behind his back. The steel cuffs ratcheted tight, too tight. "You're under arrest," Braden panted, the adrenaline still coursing through him. "For what charge?" Marcus asked. His cheek was pressed against the hot metal of the Jaguar's roof where Braden had shoved him. "Disorderly conduct," Braden said, "and failure to obey a lawful order, and resisting." "Those are catch-all charges," Marcus said, his voice muffled but distinct. "They are the charges officers use when they have no actual probable cause. You are arresting me because I bruised your ego. And I want you to remember this moment, officer. I want you to remember the feeling of these cuffs on my wrists, because you are going to trade places with me sooner than you think. Shut up. Get in the car." Braden hauled Marcus away from his vehicle, leaving the Jaguar jacked up on the side of the road, the trunk open, the tools scattered. He shoved the city legal director into the back of the patrol unit. The back seat of a police cruiser is designed to be dehumanizing. It is hard plastic, cramped, and smells of old sweat and disinfectant. Marcus sat awkwardly, his shoulders aching from the position of his arms. He closed his eyes and began to breathe deeply. He wasn't panicking. He was working. He was building the file in his head. Time of stop, 2:15 p.m. Officer name, Braden. Badge number. I didn't get it, but I have his face. Refusal to acknowledge the flat tire. Refusal to allow access to ID. Excessive force in cuffing. Use of son as a trigger for escalation. This is a textbook Section 1983 violation. Braden got into the driver's seat. He didn't look back at his prisoner. He just put the car in gear and peeled away, leaving the hazard lights of the Jaguar blinking a silent warning to no one. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. It was a silent drive. Braden had turned off his radio, likely trying to calm his own nerves. He was starting to come down from the adrenaline spike, and the nagging voice of doubt was beginning to whisper. Why was the guy so calm? Why did he know the penal codes? But Braden pushed the thoughts away. The guy was probably a jailhouse lawyer, some ex-con who spent his time in the library, learning just enough to be annoying. That had to be it. They pulled into the rear sally port of the 4th Precinct. This was the irony that almost made Marcus smile. The 4th Precinct was the flagship station. It was where the chief had his secondary office. It was where Marcus came every other Wednesday for risk management meetings. He knew the layout of the building better than Braden did. He knew that the keypad code to the back door had been changed 3 weeks ago because he had authorized the memo. Braden hauled Marcus out of the car. Let's go. Move. They walked through the heavy steel doors and into the processing area. It was a sterile room with concrete floors and a high booking desk. Behind the desk sat Sergeant Frank Miller. Frank was 58, a relic of the old guard, but a good man. He was close to retirement. He was drinking coffee and reading a sports magazine when the door buzzed. He didn't look up immediately. "What do you got, Braden? Another loiterer?" Frank asked, his voice bored. "Disorderly and resisting," Braden said, puffing out his chest. "Guy wouldn't listen, acting aggressive." "Name?" Frank asked, finally looking up over his reading glasses. "Refused to ID," Braden said. "John Doe, for now." Frank looked at the man in handcuffs. He looked at the polo shirt. He looked at the face. He blinked. He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes, then looked again. The color drained from Frank's face so fast it looked like he'd been shot. "Oh, sweet Jesus," Frank whispered. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "What?" Braden asked, confused. Frank ignored him. He came around the desk, moving faster than he had in years. "Mr. Thorne, sir, is that you?" Marcus nodded politely. "Hello, Frank. How are the grandkids?" Braden looked between them, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. You know this guy, Sarge." Frank turned on Braden with a look of pure horror mixed with fury. "Know him, you idiot. This is Marcus Thorne. He's the city legal director. He's the head of the legal department. He's the man who represents the police chief." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. Braden looked at Marcus. He looked at the cuffs. He looked back at Frank. He said he was a lawyer," Braden stammered. "I thought he was lying." "He's not a lawyer, you moron," Frank hissed. "He's the lawyer. He's the city's lawyer." Panic in a police station is a unique thing. It's not loud screaming. It's hushed, frantic urgency. It's the sound of careers dying. "Get those cuffs off him," Frank barked. "Right now." "Hold on, Frank," Marcus said, his voice cool. "Do not remove these handcuffs." Frank froze. "Sir." "If you take them off, you tamper with the evidence of the arrest condition," Marcus said. "I want the watch commander down here. I want Lieutenant Harris. And I want him to see me exactly as Officer Braden brought me in. I want the full picture documented." "Call Harris," Frank told Braden. "Now." Braden was shaking. He fumbled for his radio. "LT to processing. Urgent." 2 minutes later, Lieutenant Harris burst through the doors. He was a sharp political officer who knew exactly which way the wind blew. When he saw Marcus Thorne in handcuffs standing next to a terrified-looking Kyle Braden, he looked like he might vomit. "Director Thorne," Harris said, walking over with his hands raised in apology. "Sir, I don't know what happened here, but we are going to fix it immediately. Braden, uncuff him." "I advised Sergeant Frank to wait for you," Marcus said. "I want you to see this lieutenant. I want you to see your officer's judgment in physical form. I was changing a tire. I identified myself. I was arrested for disorderly conduct because I asked for a supervisor." Harris turned to Braden. His eyes were cold, dead things. "Is that true? You arrested the legal director for a flat tire." "He was resisting LT. He wouldn't show ID." "Because you wouldn't let me get it," Marcus corrected. "You told me if I moved you would drop me." Harris closed his eyes for a second, rubbing his temples. "Uncuff him. Now. That is an order." Braden fumbled with the key. His hands were trembling so badly he dropped it once. When the cuffs finally clicked open, Marcus rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations. "I need water," Marcus said. "And I need a conference room. I am not going to the cells, obviously, but I am not leaving either." "Anything you need, sir," Harris said. He turned to Braden. "Give me your gun and your badge. Go sit in the break room. Do not speak to anyone. Do not text anyone. You are relieved of duty pending an immediate internal review." Braden placed his gun and shield on the booking desk. He looked small now. The uniform looked like a costume he didn't know how to wear. He walked away, shoulders slumped into the back hallway. "Sir?" Harris said to Marcus. "Please accept my deepest apologies. The chief is on his way. We can make this right." "Lieutenant," Marcus said, adjusting his cuffs, "you can't make this right. You can only make it legal. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here for the paperwork." Marcus sat in the conference room, a bottle of water untouched in front of him. He had his phone out. He didn't call his wife yet. He didn't want to worry her until he was home. He called the city manager. "David," Marcus said when the line picked up. "It's Marcus. We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Budget. Liability. Significant liability. I'm currently at the 4th Precinct." "Are you helping with a case on a Sunday?" "No, David. I was the case. I was just arrested by one of our officers." There was a long silence on the other end. "Excuse me. False arrest, excessive force, unlawful detention, racial profiling. I was handcuffed for changing a tire on my own car. I'm going to need you to authorize outside counsel for the city. I obviously cannot represent the department in this matter, as I will be the plaintiff." "Marcus, tell me you're joking." "I wish I were. I need the body cam footage secured immediately. I want the dash cam. I want the dispatch logs. I'm triggering a litigation hold on all data related to Officer Kyle Braden." By the time the police chief arrived, the station was in lockdown mode. The chief, a man named Henderson, whom Marcus had known for a decade, looked devastated. He walked into the conference room and sat down heavily. "Marcus," he said, "I saw the footage. Harris pulled it up. It's indefensible." "I know," Marcus said. "He escalated from 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. He didn't listen. He didn't look." "I'm firing him," Henderson said. "I'm initiating termination proceedings tonight. Conduct unbecoming civil rights violations incompetence. He's done." "That's a start," Marcus said. "But you and I both know Braden isn't the only problem. He felt comfortable doing that. He felt empowered. That's a training issue. That's a culture issue. If he does that to me, the city legal director, what is he doing to the kid who works at the grocery store? What is he doing to the mechanic? That's what scares me, Chief. I can fight back. They can't." Marcus stood up. He gathered his things. "I want the arrest report. I want the booking sheet labeled released, detention only. And I want to ride back to my car. I have a tire to change." The fallout was swift and absolute. Officer Kyle Braden was terminated following an expedited internal affairs investigation. The union didn't even fight it. The video was so damning that defending him would have been political suicide. The footage showed a calm, professional older man being screamed at by a hysterical officer who refused to acknowledge reality. It was viral gold, but the city kept it under seal as part of the settlement, though leaks are inevitable in this digital age. The city settled with Marcus Thorne for $450,000. It was a quick settlement. The city council didn't want a public trial where their own lawyer cross-examined their own police force. Marcus didn't buy a boat. He didn't upgrade his house. He took the check and deposited it into a new trust. He founded the Thorne Legal Defense Fund, a non-profit clinic designed to provide top-tier legal representation to indigent citizens who had been subjected to unlawful stops. He hired 2 young, hungry civil rights attorneys to run it. Braden left the state. Last anyone heard, he was working construction in Nevada, telling anyone who would listen that he got a raw deal, that he was just following procedure. But he knows the truth. He knows he let his bias blind him. 6 months later, Marcus was back in his office. He was looking over a file for a new case. A young man had been stopped for walking in the roadway and ended up tased. Marcus picked up his pen. Before this, he might have looked for ways to minimize the city's exposure. He might have looked for loopholes to defend the officer. Now he looked at the file differently. He saw the human being on the other side of the report. He picked up the phone and called the chief. "Chief, it's Marcus. We're not fighting this one. We're settling. And you need to retrain that sergeant." The system worked for Marcus Thorne because he was Marcus Thorne. He had the title, the knowledge, and the power. But his story serves as a mirror. It forces us to ask, what happens when it's not the legal director? What happens when it's you? As Marcus drove home that evening, passing the spot on Old Mill Road where he had knelt in the dirt, he didn't feel anger anymore. He felt a heavy responsibility. He had been given a glimpse of the jagged edge of the sword he had helped sharpen for years. And now he was going to spend the rest of his career making sure that sword didn't cut the innocent. Justice isn't just about laws. It's about the people enforcing them having the wisdom to see the difference between a criminal and a man fixing a flat tire. Thank you for reading this story. It's a heavy one, but necessary. What do you think? Should officers be required to carry personal liability insurance for cases like this? Or is the termination enough? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you believe in accountability, share this story. Let's keep the conversation going. Stay safe out there, folks.